The wind howled like a wounded beast, tearing through the trees and whipping the rain into a frenzy. The sky was a dark, angry grey, and the thunder rolled like the drums of war. In the middle of this chaos, a man and his horse struggled forward, their silhouettes barely visible against the storm. The man, named Thomas, was a rugged figure with a face weathered by years of hardship. His loyal horse, Shadow, was a magnificent black stallion with a coat that gleamed like polished obsidian. Together, they had faced many challenges, but nothing like this. Thomas tightened his grip on the reins, his knuckles white from the strain. "We have to keep going, Shadow," he muttered, more to himself than to the horse. "We can't stop now." Shadow snorted, his breath visible in the cold air. He was tired, but he would never let Thomas down. They had been through too much together. The storm had come out of nowhere, catching them off guard. They were miles from the nearest town, and the path ahead was treacherous. The ground was slick with mud, and the rain made it almost impossible to see. But Thomas knew they couldn't stop. They had to reach the town before nightfall. There was something important waiting for them. Something that could change everything. As they pressed on, Thomas's mind wandered back to the promise he had made. It was a promise to a dying friend. A promise that had brought him and Shadow on this perilous journey. His friend, a man named Samuel, had been like a brother to him. They had fought side by side in the war. And Samuel had saved Thomas's life more times than he could count. But in the end, it was Samuel who had fallen, struck down by an enemy's bullet. Before he died, Samuel had made Thomas promise to deliver a letter to his wife and daughter in the town of Willow Creek. The letter contained something important, something that could save their lives. Thomas had sworn to deliver the letter, no matter the cost. And now, with the storm raging around them, he was determined to keep that promise. The path ahead was blocked by a raging river, swollen by the storm. The bridge that once spanned the river was gone, swept away by the floodwaters. Thomas and Shadow stood at the edge, staring at the churning water. "We have to cross," Thomas said, his voice firm. "There's no other way." Shadow whinnied nervously, his ears twitching. He didn't like the look of the river, but he trusted Thomas. Thomas dismounted and led Shadow to the water's edge. The current was strong, and the water was icy cold. But they had no choice. "Stay close to me," Thomas said, gripping the reins tightly. "We'll make it together." They stepped into the water, the cold biting into their skin. The current tugged at them, threatening to pull them under. But Thomas held on, his determination unwavering. Step by step, they fought their way across. The water rose to their chests, and the current grew stronger. But Thomas and Shadow pressed on, their bond giving them strength. Finally, they reached the other side, dripping wet and exhausted. But they had made it. As they continued their journey, the storm began to ease. The rain slowed to a drizzle, and the wind died down. But the danger was far from over. They were approaching a dense forest when a figure stepped out from the shadows. It was a man, dressed in tattered clothes and holding a rifle. His eyes were cold and calculating, and his smile was anything but friendly. "Where do you think you're going?" the man asked, his voice dripping with menace. Thomas's hand instinctively went to the hilt of his knife. "We are just passing through," he said, his voice steady. "We mean no trouble." The man chuckled, a sound that sent a chill down Thomas's spine. "Trouble has a way of finding people like you," he said. "Now, hand over your horse and whatever else you've got. And maybe I'll let you live." Thomas's grip tightened on the reins. He wasn't about to let this man take Shadow. Not after everything they had been through. "Shadow, get ready," Thomas whispered, his eyes never leaving the stranger. The man raised his rifle, aiming it at Thomas. "Last chance," he said. Thomas didn't hesitate. With a swift motion, he pulled his knife and threw it at the man. The blade struck true, hitting the man in the shoulder. He cried out in pain, dropping the rifle. "Now, Shadow!" Thomas shouted. Shadow reared up, his powerful hooves striking the man and knocking him to the ground. Thomas quickly retrieved his knife and disarmed the man, tying him up with a length of rope. "You'll regret this," the man spat, his eyes filled with hatred. Thomas ignored him, mounting Shadow and riding away. They didn't have time to waste. As they approached the town of Willow Creek, the sun began to break through the clouds. The storm was finally over, but the challenges were far from finished. The town was small, with a few wooden buildings and a dirt road running through the center. It was quiet, too quiet. There was no sign of life, no people walking the streets. Thomas dismounted and led Shadow to the nearest building, a small inn. The door was ajar, and the inside was dark. He stepped inside, his hand on his knife. "Hello," he called out, his voice echoing in the empty room. There was no response. The place was deserted. Thomas's heart sank. Where was everyone? Had they been too late? He searched the inn, finding nothing but dust and cobwebs. It was as if the town had been abandoned. But then he heard a sound, a faint cry coming from upstairs. He followed the sound, his heart pounding in his chest. In one of the rooms, he found a woman and a young girl, huddled together in fear. The woman looked up at him, her eyes wide with terror. "Please, don't hurt us," she begged. Thomas held up his hands, showing he meant no harm. "I'm not here to hurt you," he said. "I'm a friend of Samuel's. He sent me to deliver this." He handed her the letter, and her eyes filled with tears as she read it. "Thank you," she whispered. "You have no idea what this means to us." Thomas nodded, feeling a sense of relief. He had kept his promise. Chapter 6, The Truth. As the woman and her daughter prepared to leave the town, Thomas learned the truth about what had happened. The town had been attacked by a group of bandits who had taken everything of value and driven the people away. The woman and her daughter had hidden, too afraid to leave. But the letter Thomas had delivered contained information about a hidden stash of gold, enough to rebuild the town and start anew. It was Samuel's final gift to his family and to the town he had called home. With the bandits gone, the people began to return, and the town slowly came back to life. Thomas and Shadow stayed for a while, helping to rebuild and protect the town from further attacks. But eventually, it was time to move on. Thomas had kept his promise, and now it was time to find a new path. Chapter 7, The Last Ride. As they rode away from Willow Creek, Thomas felt a sense of peace. He had faced the storm, the river, and the bandits, and he had come out stronger. And through it all, Shadow had been by his side, loyal and unwavering. They had overcome the impossible, and now they were ready for whatever came next. The sun was setting, casting a golden glow over the landscape. Thomas looked at Shadow, a smile on his face. "Let's see where the road takes us," he said. Shadow whinnied in agreement, and together they rode off into the sunset, ready for their next adventure.